When I first started wanting to publish a book, I really wanted to go with a mainline publisher, partly because I didn't understand what self-publishing was or how it worked. And so I had to do some digging and research, because typically going through a major publisher, you have to submit your manuscript, you have to have it accepted, they'll write you up contracts, and it has to be agreeable terms, but it's typically more on their terms. They'll do advances, they do things in a very specific way. And the main benefit that I found of having a mainstream publisher is that they are going to do a lot of marketing for you. For example, Hay House, they're a very common and popular publisher because they build up a lot of like self-help gurus. They have a self-publishing company, which is kind of like your hybrid route, which is called Balboa Press. But even in going the hybrid routes, they don't guarantee that those hybrid companies that are related are going to pass your stuff on to the main people, and they want an investment from you. So if you weren't accepted by a mainstream publisher and you want a publisher involved, you have to fork out money. The cheapest package I have ever seen was $1,000. It gets up where it can get into like $2,500, $3,000 for their help. And a lot of times they can stipulate that you need to have like a certain number in print off the bat. So you may end up with, kind of like when you're direct sales and, the way they used to do Avon, where you had to buy all the stock and then resell it. You could end up with a book that just wasn't what you thought it was going to be, didn't sell the way you wanted, wasn't marketed right, who knows why, and have an investment that didn't pan out right. So I went the self-publishing route, because it was free. They did also offer options for low-cost investments for help with things that I didn't know how to do, if it's needed. So they also offered a forum so that you can discuss with other authors, people involved with KDP, that kind of thing, where you can ask questions and get some help that way. But they do offer, like, if you need help with editing, maybe you can pay $200 and they'll have somebody review for you. So you don't have to make a full-blown publisher investment to still get help with the hard stuff. And that's really, I think editing is one of the most important pieces of self-publishing. You don't have a professional editor on your team and on your side. So you need to find people that you trust that can help you and work on it. But I'll come back to that. So it can be free to do self-publishing, but it's also open and flexible if you do need help to invest small amounts here and there to get the extra help to push your book over the edge. The second main reason that I chose self-publishing is that you get to own all of the rights to your book. That's a big deal to me, especially as a Christian author. I know I open this up so that anybody can come, but especially if I'm going to talk about God, I don't want to hand over my content for somebody else to be able to change what it says. And this doesn't happen with every major publisher, but a lot of times, especially if you don't have good representation helping you look through the contracts they write with you, doing these contracts with them can sign over your rights to own your own material. You can write the entire book yourself, but the second you sign the contract, something in there will say that they own it, you no longer have rights to it, you can't reproduce, they can make changes to your content, make what they want it to be, and I just didn't want to hand that over. That was really precious and important to me. Third reason is that there are no contracts. So I can start production and printing of a book, make it available at any time, but I can also stop production of the book at any time and send in updates, changes, or modifications to my manuscript at any time, which is really nice. For example, that second book I told you I wrote and I decided I wanted to make changes, it was only out for 2 weeks. I stopped publication. It was no longer available. And I just had a few clicks of a button to be able to do that. I wasn't breaking contract with anybody. I wasn't violating anything. It didn't mean I had to pay back in advance, so I was allowed to roll with my conscience without having to pay a penalty for it. Huge deal to me. I also like self-publishing because it's print to order. So again, like I was saying, some companies will make you do an immediate first printing of like 5,000 books, 50,000 books, whatever their goal is, and you're hoping they're going to sell. So with self-publishing, somebody orders it, then it gets printed. They don't make you order a certain number. I didn't have to order any at all when I first did. Obviously I chose to, because the best way to sell your book is out of your hand. But there was no obligation to. So I wasn't, kind of like with the MLM example again, I wasn't forced to make a large investment that I wasn't confident I could back up. New author, new everything. It's a crapshoot. You never know. Another reason that I chose self-publishing, again, there's so many reasons in the modern technology world that it's so valuable, but I was able to set my own pricing. They will give you, and I'll talk a little bit more about pricing when we get in here. I'll show you kind of what I did with mine. They give you a minimum cost that you have to sell the book for, that you can't go below that number because of printing costs and expense, as well as, Amazon taking their cut out of producing a book for you, which honestly I'm fine with, because they're so flexible in this manner. It's not like they're asking you to invest. I'm fine with them taking a cut. But they'll give you a minimum price, and then you can increase the sale price to whatever you want it to be. That means if you want it to basically be as cheap as possible on an ethical stand where you're just like wanting to make it accessible, you can do that. If you want to kick it up $10 so that you can make a living off the book, you can do that. It's very open to whatever you're looking to accomplish with the book. And I know lots of people who do that, where they self-publish a book and they just want it to be a professional paperback copy, so they really don't, kick the price up. But it's flexible, and that means it's up to you. Again, that level of control that you have as self-publishing is so, so nice. And they still have many, many, many distribution channels. It's open to, if you just want it to be available on the Amazon website only. My book is also available on barnesandnoble.com. I think there may be a couple other websites. I was able to go to Crossroads and they have it on the shelf. So there are plenty of ways you can open up distribution channels. It's not just the Amazon website where it's available when you use KDP. And you'll still qualify for things like bestseller lists. You're not exempt from them because you didn't go through a major publisher. You have to be able to plan ahead, but hopefully by giving you this information, you'll be able to plan ahead a little bit better, start ramping up and building up your publicity before your book promotes and comes out. Because ideally, by the time you hit the publish button and you're ready for people to have a copy of your book in your hand and be selling it, you want people to have been anticipating that to happen. So, and by self-publishing, you have your whole process to just be transparent. Hey, I finished a draft of my book today. I'm so excited about it. Social media posts. You get the opportunity to just use the transparency of your process to market your book. Maybe put together a launch event where you come into full circle and everybody can come enjoy, some pizza and some drinks and, talk about your book. I'm going to do that with my next one that comes out. I'm going to have a launch event. So anything that just builds up hype before it comes out, that's not that hard. As long as you know your target audience and you know how to reach them, which you wouldn't write your book if you didn't, right? The very first thing before we get into the website is that you have to write the book. I have a lot of people that ask about self-publishing before they've even written a word, and it's great to be informed and to know what you're getting into, but I've offered every single one of them that finish your manuscript. I will sit down with you, I will proofread your book for you, I will give you some feedback, I will help you go through the process if you need help, and nobody ever gets to finishing and writing the last page. So you have to write the book. So my couple of tips that I give when people ask about the writing process in general is just that find your topic message and your layout. If you have those two things, the book will write itself. A lot of people sit down to their laptop with an idea in mind, and then they get writer's block because they're trying to start at A and get to Z without knowing where B, C, D, E, and F fall. They're not mapping out the journey. You know, you can do that by outlining if that helps you. For me, I figure out the best way to represent the story. So for example, the first book I wrote was called 7-Eleven. It was because the friend that I went on this road trip with, he always saw the number 7 for some reason. It was really weird, you know, one of those synchronicity things. And I always saw the number 11. And it was a road trip, and there are gas stations called 7-Eleven. So, you know, double meaning. It was a week-long road trip. So what I did, and we were very musically centered people. We loved the same kind of music. We always talked about it. So I divided up each section of the book by one day at a time. So the chapter started with the date, and then the chapter was the day. And each chapter started with song lyrics that we listened to on the trip and that pertain to what happened in the chapter. So that was how I subdivided the book out, wrote itself, because I know what happened on this day and this day and this day. The book that I did over here, Perfect Love, a Hero's Journey, I knew that I wanted to talk about the Christian development and growth process. You know, the things we do beyond just accepting Jesus, and, you know, our growth into more of like discipleship. But I didn't want to ignore the idea that we have to accept Christ, right? So what I did with that book is I took the 17-step hero's journey developed by Joseph Campbell, and I applied the Christian walk to it. So there's the first chunk, the first subsection is all about, you know, faith and accepting Jesus. The second section was all about, you know, kind of like developing doctrine and repentance and the, you know, like what he asked us to do. And then the third section was all about fellowship and leadership. So, and that's just how the hero's journey mapped out well. So it wrote itself because each section was already identified for me. As long as you know what you want to write about and you know how you want it presented, like that is really going to accent your message the most, the rest should write itself. You know, outline it out, how your chapter is going to break down. And it doesn't have to be a traditional chapter. That irks me so much because I like books that take a different approach to displaying things. It doesn't just have to be chapter 1, this happened, chapter 2, this happened. You know, whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction, it's just a subdivision of sections. So find a way that accents your message and don't worry so much about it being traditional formatting. So that's really what I like to tell people who are working on the writing process. The book also ended up having, at the end of each section, was space for people to write and some questions. So it's mildly got aspects of a devotional or a workbook. So again, you know, it was that idea that I wanted people to apply what they just read. So you may go that route. You may have, you said you're doing a devotional. If you want people to write things in the book, or if you want them to buy a journal and journal along with it, you know, you can figure out how you want the layout to go. But ultimately, just figure out how you want it to pull the message out the most, and really it kind of writes itself. The other part I'm going to tell you, and I'll show you where it is later, but formatting your book when you're self-publishing is the biggest hassle in the whole wide world. So instead of just free thought, free flow typing it up in like a Word document, they have in KDP templates for ultimately your finished project has to match their margin settings, their page structures. You can't have your images going outside of the borders, otherwise printing is a hassle. And they give you the template here. You can literally just click, download the template, and type into it. Modify the template yourself. I highly recommend, if you're ready to start writing, like before you even really sit down, if you can, set yourself up with a KDP account and go find the template and type all of it into that. Because transferring your free thought and copy and pasting it into the template and then trying to figure your borders and readjust your paragraphs is such a nightmare. It's 2 or 3 weeks of your life you'll wish you had back. So just write it how you want it to look the first time around, and you will skip that whole nasty step. A lot of the tools that you'll use on the website are mostly applicable once it's done. A lot of it you won't really be able to do much until you have your full completed manuscript. But knowing a few things ahead of time pays off in the long run. Once you feel like you're about to the point where you have a completed manuscript, I'm going to recommend this. Find 2 people to proofread it who have skills in grammar, spelling, punctuation, structural flow especially, because when you've spent weeks, maybe even months, focusing on writing your manuscript, it jumbles together in your head. You know what it's supposed to say because it's your message. So sometimes it's easy to have that moment where your eyes gloss over something that needs fixed. I didn't know until after I published my last book that apparently my laptop decided to flip all of my apostrophes backwards. And so I had a whole, probably 50 copies sold before I even noticed that half of the words that had an apostrophe in it, the apostrophe was backwards. Drove me crazy. Had to go back in, fix it, and re-upload my changes, and then they went live right away. So again, another benefit of using something like this, it didn't take months for the change to go into effect. But my eye didn't see it because I knew what direction that apostrophe was supposed to be. So find at least 2 people who can proofread your book for those important things. But like I said, especially structural flow. Is this chunky or am I transitioning well? Does this paragraph actually belong here instead of here? Because sometimes we'll repeat ourselves and not realize it. I mean, that's a 350-page book. It's hard by the time you get start to finish not to, there were moments where I was like, did I repeat myself? I don't know. And then I try to go back and read it, but get halfway through the book and I forgot what I wondered if I was repeating myself. I just was too invested in it to be able to see that clearly. So have 2 people who can step back and do that for you. And then find 2 people who are in your target audience. You're going to have to identify who your target audience is, who you're wanting to buy and read your book. Now, ultimately, with something as large, grand, and vague as the hero's journey and anyone's walk in Christ, I really didn't have much of a target audience except somebody who wants to look deeper into faith. And that could literally be anybody. But, for example, Shelley's book, her theme was really about her trials and tribulations in her childhood. So her target audience was primarily women and people who've suffered abuse, about that coming out of the pain and suffering. So, she had a specific target market of people it was going to be most beneficial to. You're writing a Christian or a mystery novel. Not everybody reads mystery novels, so you need to find and define what your target market is. So everybody needs to be able to know who their target market is, and then find at least 2 people who can proof that book, because you want to know how your target audience is going to respond to it. And they're going to be able to give you feedback that the person looking for grammar and flow is not going to be able to give you. It's just a different perspective to be looking at it from, and ultimately is going to help you complete a more balanced and finished perspective for your book.
Does it make a difference if they personally know you and know? Is it better to have a stranger with this?
If it's somebody who knows you, make sure that you trust them implicitly to give you honest feedback. Because let's be real, if you ask your mom or brother who loves you to read your work, they're going to say it's amazing. And what is that really going to produce as far as change? If you're really looking for what do I need to fix about this, they may not be willing to tell you because they don't want to hurt your feelings, even if you're asking for it. I mean, I went to my pastor's wife when I was about to publish this book and asked her to proof it for me. And she's like, listen, everybody who asks for help isn't actually looking for the nitty gritty, So she was very generalized and vague about her criticism. And it helped, but I wanted more. But she knows me, she cares about me, she didn't want me to stop coming to church because she offended me. So, I get that. And so I had to ask people who were a little detached from me too. But, your target audience isn't going to be only friends and family. So if you really want an honest reflection of what you've written and how it's going to impact the general population, if you can find somebody who doesn't really know you, a stranger who you trust not to steal your content, maybe find a writers group that, it's some of the writers groups here that meet up. There's poets, there's all kinds of different groups that meet here. You know, they have the write-ins all the time, so maybe you can find someone who's willing to do a swap of time, like I'll read yours if you read mine. Maybe somebody from your church who you're not necessarily in contact with all that much. Look for somebody who can give you some honest, unbiased feedback, at least as unbiased as you can find. But I mean, if you have one of those brutally honest family or friend, you know, let them have it.
What about copywriting before you start handing this out all over?
KDP will give you an ISBN number, and personally, that's all I've ever worried about. That and my copyright page, as long as you're very implicit on creating your copyright page. Just grab somebody else's book and look at how they did it. So, for example, especially when you're quoting sources, you have to be very careful about your copyright pages. But I started out with a book from Chris Songskin. He wrote Quit Church. I grabbed his and I looked at his and then I expanded on it. So I had to put every Bible that I referenced, because apparently everything with the KJV has copyright. Fun facts.
So
Didn't know you
if
could
I
copyright
use
that.
scripture,
Yes.
I need to document each scripture.
You need to document which version of the scripture that you pulled from. Ideally, stick to one. I know that there are some people who will pull from multiple, but you'll have to cite every single one. And from what I have seen, most of them will say, if you go to their publisher's website, most of them will say, as long as you have less than 500 verses or something like that, you can just use this blanket one. You don't have to get explicit permission. But if a large chunk of your book is excessive use of scripture, you may have to request permission from the publisher, and they may want to evaluate your work, that kind of thing. I used a piece of art that somebody else drew, and they gave me permission to use it. By the way, don't ever, 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 ever use anyone else's photo, any image whatsoever that you have not gotten explicit permission for. You will get sued. They will find out that,
Yeah, you need to get a form.
Yeah.
And then design it.
you need to have somewhere that they gave you written permission.
Wow.
I like to reach out and ask people on Facebook. That way it's in writing, and usually that's enough for them. But a signed document is even better. They told me they were fine with me using it as long as I referenced the specific wording of what I wrote right here on my copyright page. So that's what I did there. I put my general blurb about all rights reserved, no part of this publication may be reproduced, blah, blah, blah. And that's just protecting the ability of people not to go and, like make photocopies of your entire book and plaster it somewhere or treat it like they wrote it. As long as it's stated, it's just a protection that I was clear about this to protect you and ideally like your reputation. People can't go and rip you apart. I acknowledged who I used, which was CreateSpace at the time, and I put a disclaimer. If you're using anything that references people, like real life stories, real life people, first of all, do your best to change names. Maybe be cute about it and ask them what they want their fake name to be and if it's okay with them. Make sure they're okay with you sharing your story, and then put a disclaimer in your book that this is not intended to do any harm to people. You just have to cover yourself because, there have been times where people have published stories where the person that it was about, while it was not intended to do them any harm, felt really offended by the information coming out. There was a suing, somebody got sued. So you have to be very careful about sharing personal stories about other people, and just make sure you have a disclaimer. I wrote, the words of this book are written from my personal perspective. I recognize that the events described may have been viewed differently from the perspective of others involved. Sharing the story is intended to provide insight for healing to anyone facing similar challenges and is in no way intended to harm the real people involved. So just general blanket statement. I'm just sharing my story, trying to help people, not trying to hurt anybody. That's all you really got to do.
Would you be okay with sharing that page?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I can copy and then
Yeah, and you can just see what I did. Yep. And then on the bottom of your copyright, you need to have your ISBN number. which like I said, KDP will give you a free one. You don't have to go buy it separately, which is nice. It does.
Say that again.
KDP will give you a free ISBN number.
Is that right?
Yep, you don't have to go purchase it.
Wow.
Somebody has suggested to me before that if you use the one that they give you and you don't go buy your own, if you ever just get picked up by another publisher, you may encounter a challenge with taking your book from KDP and going to that publisher.
Mm-hmm.
So if you feel like that's a goal for you, that you want your book to just be out in self-publishing until a publisher picks it up, well then buy your own and be safe about it. But I don't really ever want to do that. I appreciate the flexibility too much, because going to a publisher, like I said, is going to involve contracts that I don't want to deal with. So I intend to stick with self-publishing and just roll with that, and I didn't worry about it, and I used theirs. So.
Where have you been? I could have used you over 4 years ago, because I've written 2 books already, and I don't have a high school, or I have a high school education but no college. I was told one time by Don Piper, I don't know if anybody knows him, he wrote 90 Minutes in Heaven. He always said to me, write what you know.
Yes, absolutely. As far as self-publishing goes, this is not stuff that the website necessarily explains too thoroughly. You'd have to kind of look it up. So I just wanted to make sure you're aware of the information you've got to have on your copyright page.
I don't have all of that on
A
my
lot of
books.
people don't, and I mean sometimes it's okay, but sometimes it's a danger zone.
I have
so.
on the bottom, of yours there, I wrote my own thing about, because the second book that I wrote, it's actually a true story, but I did write in there that it was based on a true story, and all the names, some of the names have been changed, and
To protect the
blah
identity.
blah blah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that makes total sense.
That works okay unless you have your family in there.
Right.
My family, I left their names in. I told them I ain't getting out of this.
I don't care.
Sometimes there's a little bit of a family
Oh yeah.
friction thing
No,
going on, and then
my own kids wouldn't do that to me.
so that's a little bit of a gray area that you
Yeah.
also have to be a little careful of too. So
Yeah, definitely. So just watch your back, just if it sounds like something that could ever potentially cause a problem, be a step ahead of it, and
Yeah.
then it won't be a problem later.
Do you need to register your copyright anywhere?
If you just use the ISBN that they give you, as far as I know, you don't. They never explicitly implied that I did. Anywhere
You
else.
can get a copyright. You can go to the copyright office and get one yourself. Modern publications, because of self-publishing, it's not necessarily what people do anymore. It used to be something that you did automatically. The first draft that you do, you just automatically send it off, and you get that protection, so that if it does end up on the internet, that people can, take it your content. But
Yeah.
it doesn't happen anymore. So.
See, my first
I mean, it'd be
book-
pretty clear if you
Yeah.
just had the book and the publishing date with the company that it was your original content. So
It's pretty cheap if you want to. It's
Pretty
like
defensible.
$25
Yeah.
or something to
See,
get
my
an
first
official
book-
copyright.
I actually went through the Library of Congress and asked them for an ISBN number. And I ended up getting this odd number, and I thought, well, that must be an ISBN number. Although I looked in a lot of books, I thought, well, mine isn't like that, Well, I finally found out, I was so green on my first book. I still kind of am, but I was really green on my first book. But that number that they gave me, it was because they said the reason they didn't give me an ISBN number was because I wanted to promote my own book. I didn't really ask for that.
what if you dealt with the Library of Congress and have some other things like copyrights from years and years ago? Is this a number that follows you, or does it change with each thing you do?
honestly, I don't think I have an answer to that question. I'd have to look into that. I didn't even bother with getting an official copyright because I knew that I kind of published ahead of myself and I was probably going to make some revisions. So, and I kind of just kept it within friends and family at first so that I could have the time to make those revisions and hear their feedback. So I didn't really bother with copywriting. Once I feel like I'm really solid and I have nothing else I want to modify, no, backwards parentheses or anything, I'll probably get one.
So that number actually just protects the article you're working on right now.
The ISBN locks down that title and that content is yours, and that's like how they identify it, basically.
So if I did a second book,
You'll get a
that would
different
get a
ISBN
new
number.
number.
Yep,
So-
every book is a different one.
With the one that you did, you said you did a lot of editing and revisions. You came up with a brand new book. Did you use the same ISBN number for that, or did you have a second one after you had all those revisions?
Nope, every book, new ISBN.
Okay.
Yep.
So if you made revisions to even to this one, an adjustment would be get new ISBN, or
No, revision to
second
this
edition?
did not require me to get a new ISBN. Revisions to this wasn't like a whole new book. It was just like restructuring, take a word out of this sentence, that kind of thing. It'll make a little more sense when I show you some of the stuff in the computer. But this actually brings me to one other point that I wanted to make, that they will allow you to order proof copies of the book. Before it's actually available to the public, you can order a physical copy of your book. And if you're really looking for people to proof your book, that would probably be the best way to hand it to them. The people that I asked to proof that book, had a hard time with being emailed, a document. They, staring at the screen the whole time, or like following the formatting. It was just kind of overwhelming. It felt like grading an essay. Nobody wants to grade a 350-page essay. But once I had the physical copy of the book, I could hand them, like, I really want to read that. It was just easier for them to follow. So I highly recommend taking advantage of that. It might be one of those things where you have your two people who are proofing for grammar and flow and stuff read the early copy, and then have your target audience read the proof copies. And I'm sure that, even some of your target audience will be able to say you spelled the word cat wrong. They'll be able to catch some of those things that have extra eyes as well. But take advantage of that, because I wish I had. The website that I used is kdp.amazon.com. KDP is owned by Amazon. It is Kindle Direct Publishing.
KDP.
Yep. kdp.amazon.com. Kindle Direct Publishing. So literally like digital Kindles, all affiliated. Amazon owned CreateSpace, which was their paperback self-publishing. So they just joined it together. So now you can do both through the same program, which is pretty cool. I can convert my paperback copy into a digital copy through the same program. I will tell you that formatting for digital is another one of those pain in the butt things. Really anything that has to do with formatting a layout, it's a nightmare. That is one of those things where you may want to pay to have somebody do it for you. I've seen people who will reformat books into digital formats for a couple $100. I think it'd be worth the money, especially since most people read on digital anymore. 9 out of 10 people I know do.
I can tell you that, my first book, I had it published here in town because, like I told you earlier, I was very, very green, and I believe I still am. And it was Jason who told me, oh no, you need to do your little self-publishing. It's so simple, blah, 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 But I'm the type of person that needs to sit down with somebody and then tell me, And so when I did my second book here, I did it locally again, and yes, it cost me, it was a little over $1,000, my first book, I gotta tell you, like I say, I was green. You gotta remember, I was green. They gave me this sheet and said, well, how many books do you want to order, Darlene? Well, so I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, oh, well, the more I order, the more profit it is for me, so I got greedy. I had little dollar signs in my eyes. And so I ordered like 1,500 books. And
Oh, wow.
they're stored a lot of them are stored in my son's spare bedroom. I did not order that many this time.
Right.
Because the first books really cost me. I even had to take out a loan to pay for them, and then I finally got them paid for, and I was so relieved. Now I'm giving away a lot of them. but
Yeah.
but
That
my
can be a
second
good way
book,
to get it out there, though, too.
I didn't order that many. I ordered, what the heck was it, 250, I believe it was. And, but it still cost me around $1,000, you know.
Yeah, it's a chunk of investment for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
I can say that just in general, KDP is very generous about author pricing on ordering books. I will say this book, the minimum sale price for the book on the Amazon website was like $12.50, like $12.78, I think is what they said. But I can order a copy for close to $5.
Oh,
So at the end of the day, having people order online is not going to be the place where you make the most money.
Yes.
It's going to be buying the copy, putting it in somebody's
yeah.
hands.
So what are you charging for this book here?
15.
15?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really didn't want to mark it up very far. I mean, a book this length and this thickness should sell for 20 to 25
Well,
in
yeah.
the typical market, but the content was important to make it out and make it accessible, so I went the route of, if I sell it through a bookstore, I will make $1 off of it. If I sell it through the Amazon or Barnes & Noble website, I will make $3. But if I buy the copies
Wow.
myself and hand it to somebody, I will make $10, and I have the ability to drop the price for someone who needs it.
Oh.
So like if a church wants to do a study on the book, for example, I can say, okay, well, I can provide you 20 books for $10 a piece instead of 15 and give them a bulk discount
Right.
because it's cheaper for me. So I like that flexibility too. I mean, if this book is $5, one that's this long is like 2 or 3. You can get a copy for very, very small amount of money. And ultimately, those are the pocket-sized books. Stuff this thick and smaller is what a lot of people are reading these days. They want things that are bite-sized chunks, take it to the beach, that kind of thing. So I really didn't care. I had to put the content out the way I wanted to put the content out, and who wants to read it will read it. But this is your main page for KDP. You see a little guy with the computer. I always thought it looked like he was playing a drum set when I first glanced at it, but he's just sitting at a computer. And I think I connected it through my Amazon account, so they know who I am anyway. So this is your main login page. They'll have the bookshelf, the reports, the community, and the KDP Select. So community is where they have that forum full of like questions and stuff. So if you need help with something, that's a good place to go to ask your questions or read some of their, commonly asked question things, read some of their tips from other authors, that kind of thing. Reports is where you can read about your sales through different vendors and that kind of thing, what your sales look like, just every report you can think imaginable related to it. But your bookshelf is where you're going to do a lot of like your publishing based stuff, and that's the page it starts you on. So that's where we're at here. So Perfect Love, a Hero's Journey is the book that I published, and then this is the one I'm working on finishing up right now called Redeemable. So, and then I have like 2 other ones I need to finish by the end of the year before I lose them out of my mind. So, and you'll see that it's very, very user friendly. So, for example, click of a button. This one I started, Perfect Love, a Hero's Journey, I started wanting to make an ebook out of it. You can see it's got the draft. It says draft, and you can click the button and see the draft and go through some of that information. Up here, I haven't done that because I haven't uploaded the interior document yet. So it says create Kindle book. Pretty self-explanatory. Click the button, follow the directions. What I discovered with that one is that book doesn't convert into digital very well. It's not one that I'm going to put in digital format. It's meant to be a workbook. It's too long. It would be over 1,000 pages if you tried to break it down into something that would fit on somebody's phone screen or Kindle or something like that. Keep that in mind too. If you're writing your book, keep in mind what digital formatting might look like. If you make it too long, you may not be able to convert it into that medium.
How long is long?
Well, 350 pages would have been over 1,000. So one page in that book, which is a 6x9 format, which is pretty standard, would be about 3 digital pages for one. I think I've downloaded and read books that were about 500 or 600 pages on digital. I wouldn't really go beyond that personally, just because people get tired. You know, the attention span that people have is not particularly long. The other option to consider is Audible, you know, your audiobook, but that is not something that they offer. You would have to go through a company that allows you, like getting into a sound studio. It's something you can do at home if you have the right equipment and setup, but the noise reduction and all that stuff, it's better to just pay somebody to help you record your audiobook if that's what you want to do. But audiobook is another way that is really popular right now. I'm mostly focusing on the paperback publishing, but just so you're aware, those other avenues are available. So I'll take you through the one that I already did. So they have this little arrow button right here that gives you a list of options. Wrong one. So the top button here was for my ebook. This one's for the paperback. So the options in the list are edit print book details, edit print book content, edit print book pricing, request printed proofs, which is ordering your personal copies, request author copies, and promote and advertise. So you can go through them if you want to use Amazon for some of your marketing, which is not bad. I mean, they're a pretty major company. There's also buttons for unpublished print book and unlinked books. But what I'm going to do is go into edit, maybe, no.
You're under draft right now, are you?
The draft is for my the ebook, because I never followed through on it.
Oh.
I started to, and I'm like, this is not going to work for this book. So, but your main screen is where like you're going to have every book that you write.
So whatever those questions are referring to that book at that point, right?
Right.
No ebooks or anything.
So I'll just hit the continue setup on the one I'm working on right now. So the first screen, and like I said, very user friendly. If you follow what it's asking for, you really can't go wrong. But it's going to ask what language you're writing the book in, your book title, and this is another one of those things that once you have your book title established, I would go ahead and put it in right away. Make sure that when you're coming up with your book title that you do a general search on the internet to make sure nobody else has taken your title. It's happened before, I'm sure it can happen again, and sometimes there's an ability to overlap, but you may have to make a differentiation. You'd rather not have to fight the battle of making a claim against it. So for example, Joyce Meyer wrote a book called Perfect Love. My book is Perfect Love, A Hero's Journey. Different title, but some people shorthand it down to saying Perfect Love and they leave off the rest of the title, and sometimes people get confused and think it's Joyce Meyer book. I deal with it, but technically my title is different. It's not the same thing, and she couldn't really make a claim against me because the full title is different than hers. She has no claim on the words Perfect Love, but she does have claim on the words only being Perfect Love. Does that make sense? So make sure that you have a title that is not already taken.
How do you do that online?
I literally would just go to Google and type in the name of the book.
You just put the name and say book, or do you say book and title name or title search? Or
I would do it both ways. I would just put the title and hit search and see if anything comes up, because it may not be a book that's used that title. It may be a company that used the title of your book, and you don't want to compete with that either. So I would just put in first, like I would just go to Google and say Perfect Love, A Hero's Journey, and then hit search and see if anything else comes up the same. Obviously that's a pretty specific title, nobody else had that. And then maybe type in book just to double check and make sure, especially when you've got more generalized vague words. Once you have your book title, it would be good to go in here, put it in, and if you think you're gonna, establish your ISBN number, just do something that's gonna establish the claim. If it were to be a fight, they, down the road, you could back up somewhere digitally that this is when I came up with the title, this is when I wrote it, this is when I got my ISBN number attached to that title, and this is when I published it. Just kind of have the paper trail. So I like to claim my title right away. Plus it cements the book in my head, that this is what this book is. And then you can have a subtitle, but I prefer to just run with a title that is the title. That's kind of your choice though. If it is part of a series, you do need to identify that, so they'll ask you about that. If your intention is to connect a set of books together. Edition number, so if you were, the changes that I made in the book were, like grammatical, that type of thing, so I wouldn't call this book a second edition. But if I went back in and added a chunk of content, or removed a chunk of content, or modified the layout in any kind of significant way, I would probably indicate that I've done a second edition of that book and mark it as such. So I would keep that in mind too. Depends on the level of changes you're making. They want your name as you want it to appear, and even if you want anonymity, you have to put your name. It is part of the rules. You have to have your name on the cover, and I think you have to have it on the spine too.
You can use a pseudonym though if you want to.
Pretty sure you can. I've never used one, so I would just, maybe ask KDP what their rules are about pseudonyms. But they do require all their names to be on the cover and on the spine for sure. And I think you have to have it on the cover page as well. So bare minimum, like I probably would have written the book without an author name on the cover and just tried to, remove myself from it, but I really had no choice. So, and then they will ask you to type in your description field. This is what shows up on Amazon specifically, or like Barnes & Noble, whatever website is listing your book. This is not necessarily the back of your book. This is what is in the description field, like when you go to the Amazon website and it's got the typing below about what this book's about. It doesn't have to match the back of your book. It can be different, which is fine. I personally prefer to not have the same thing as the back of the book because it's just more information and more to bring in. But they will ask you to put that there, and there's a character limit, so don't get too wordy. I would say if you can keep it to 5 sentences, that's probably about more than as much as anybody's going to be willing to read anyway. They will ask you for keywords. So if somebody is searching for your book, this is keywords somebody would type in, or books related to your content. This is what they would, like somebody types in Christian books. Well, yours has keyword Christian, so this is how they're going to find you. Similar to like SEO information. They're going to make you pick a category. You don't have a choice. You have to choose a category. And they get very specific, like religion, Christian nonfiction. They really have specific categories, but that's just identifying what your book is in the grand scheme of things. And then you do have to identify if there's adult content, language, or situations, and click yes or no if it's not for children under 18. Just so they don't make it publicly available without marking it as such. So that's really your first page. It's really just very basic information, details that outline the project. Your second one is kind of the page I've been working on recently, your paperback content, and this is where you'll spend a lot of time. So the first thing they offer is your print ISBN number, and this is where like I chose to use the one that they provided me. So, you click a button, they assign it, that's it. You don't have to go to another website and register anything, they'll just provide it for you. But they do still give you an option to use your own. So you're not eliminated from using your own. But once you have them assign you an ISBN number, there's no turning back. So be confident about your decision. And then they ask for your publication date, which you can't have until it's published, so it's kind of just skip that. And then they're going to get into print options. So you can choose between black and white paper, or with a cream color, with a solid white color, or a color interior with white paper. If you allow the use of color printing, it is considerably more expensive to produce. If I had used color in this book, it would have been $5 to $10 more expensive. So I just didn't.
You mean $10 per page?
Per book,
Okay.
Production cost. Ideally, just plan for your book to be able to be printed in black and white. If you're using images on the inside of the book that are important to be in color, just be aware that it's going to add to the expense of the book production. So, you won't be able to do like a $2 author copy. It will cost more.
What type of images are they requesting? What if you have some that are old photos and you need to scan them or something? Can you do that?
As long as it's 300 DPI, which is your pixel resolution, they're not particular about what. They are particular about the margins of the pages because they don't want it to bleed over and get cut off in printing. But I've never seen them be specific about what images you use. As long as you're giving credit to the people who provided the image. I mean, if you took the picture on your cell phone, you don't have to give credit to anybody, it's your image anyway. If you are using something that a studio, for example, like a family portrait from a studio, you would probably need to get their permission to use it, a copyright release of some kind, and give them whatever credit they ask for.
Especially if I have pictures of the president of Iceland. I'll need
Yeah.
to get
His permission.
to
Bare
even put
minimum,
his
his
name in.
secretary needs to give you a signed affidavit or something like that. Definitely be careful on that one. You don't want to upset the political authorities. But I mean, you know, it's very likely they won't have an issue with it either. You know, all publicity is good publicity, right?
Does the cost of a book go up by the number of pages? Is that
Yes.
okay?
Well, the more pages they have to use and more ink they have to use, that's just, you know, their cost of production. So the longer it is and the more there is to print, the more it'll cost. Personally, if you want my solid opinion, I used white pages, not cream pages. And if you want them to write in your book, this is like, if like for devotional, if you're going to have space for them to write inside the book, go that route for sure. The cream pages are more of your like your old school books, like you remember those like pocket books that they had of like kids books, that kind of like off whitish color, a little grainier.
Antique.
Yeah. And I mean, if that's the feel of the book that you want to do, go for it. But I feel like this just prints cleaner, this white page, and it's bolder.
How about print size? I'm sure you select that also.
There you go.
So say for example you wanted to do like a small paperback like this, or an even, or not a very, or not like something like this. What would you choose for your format size?
Typically, I stick with the 6x9. This is 6x9. They do allow some smaller ones. So if you're going more for like your mystery novel, smaller size print, you can do it. But most books these days are going the 6x9 route. That's become pretty standard. For font size, for print size, I use 12-point font, and this is how it printed out. And I use standard spacing here. You might, if you're doing something that's a little bit, you know, less dense for content, you might want to do like 1.5 line spacing to put just a little bit more space between your lines. I wouldn't double space. That's kind of like looking like you're trying to eat up pages. But like just that little bit of extra space, especially maybe for a devotional, they might want note-taking abilities. So that would leave more room for them to put circles and underlines and that kind of thing. So
Also, I think depends on your, again, who your target audience is, because
right.
As we grow older, I can't see as well.
Right.
So I'm
they
used to
do
writing
offer
in
the
a
ability to do
14.
some large print stuff. I haven't done it personally, but they do offer the option for large print. But they wouldn't do that for every copy of your book. I think it's like an additional, somebody can order your book in large print if they want it.
Okay, so you would pick a standard size to start.
Yeah, I would pick a standard size. This is 12-point Times New Roman single spacing. And I think even with the single spacing, there's some decent space in between there. But ultimately, the way this came across, I have a lot of people telling me it should be a college textbook. Because the words are dense, there's a lot of information. That's kind of the layout of the page. So, but that's kind of what I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be a deeper study. So you'll want to consider that as you're formatting your pages, that your spacing matters, your font size matters, your font type matters. Don't make it anything that's illegible. You know, you may want things to look cute, but sometimes italics is the easier way to accent your words than changing the font, which is
that's
actually what I did a lot.
Romans.
This was Times New Roman, yep. And that's actually a lot of what I did. I decided to kind of follow the feel of the original scriptural text because they didn't have quotation marks in, you know, the original languages. So what I did was, instead of I instead of using quotation marks, I italicized things because it's such a dense workbook. I felt like that called things out a little bit more clearly. So like, the quote is in italics instead of quotation. I took the liberty because it's my choice and I can do what I want. And I think with the way this is a denser read, that helped points stand out rather than blending into the page. Plus, quotes within a quote is something I was able to avoid by doing that. Like how scripture says, you know, if you like, let's say I'm quoting a part of scripture where it says, and then Jesus said, blah, 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 blah. Which he didn't say blah, blah as far as I know. But I make jokes sometimes. But the idea of quotes within a quote is just so frustrating to me, and it looks so clunky. That's why I made that decision, so I wouldn't have to fight that battle 100 times. So consider that too, that you can play with the rules a little bit if it's going to make your point easier to understand.
Does it have an option to do board books if you do a children's story?
I don't think they do. They do have a limit. You have to meet a certain word count, so they don't do short books. Like a lot of poets can't publish through KDP because they don't do. You have to meet a certain word count and page count, and I think the pages are at least 50. You have to have at least 50 pages. Word count, I don't know what the exact number is, but I know I have a friend who was trying to put together a booklet of like a 33-day page, one page for each day booklet, and they said it wasn't enough words. So you do, I mean, they are publishing books, not booklets, if that makes sense. If you're trying to write a book and you're really not meeting that quota, there's always going to be a way to expand on your content. I mean, there's keeping things simple, and there's, you know, books are meant to be at least a certain length, right?
Your pages that you have, how many words are on each one of your pages, do you know?
You know, I never counted.
Standard is about 250.
Yeah, that would make sense.
So if I've typed it out and say font size of 14, and it's telling me my word count is, I don't remember now, I've got 110 pages.
Mm-hmm.
So those 110 pages would have right now, I think, 350 words on them.
Do you have 110 pages that are formatted to the book size, or are they 110 pages like a Word document, 8 by 11?
Document, on my,
Because you'll have more pages by the time it formats down into
okay.
the smaller book. You should be fine. I would be surprised if that didn't convert down to almost 150 pages at least, depending on how you structure your chapters and layout and stuff like that.
You put, I'm so green. She talks about being green, I'm really green. But do you put blank pages between your chapters?
Up to you. Because I already had writing space in between each part of my book, I didn't. Because that kind of felt like the blank space anyway. But in this book that I'm writing now, I am. Because I wanted the format to fall onto a certain page.
You see, my book here, this one here is 98 pages. And I remember, and actually both books, you know, this one, they put the wording closer together, but there's at least roughly 14,000 words in each book.
Okay.
Are you going to do yours on a computer? It should tell
Well,
you.
I have already, so it's kind of.
Yeah, because it should tell you on
I
the
lost
bottom
count.
left hand how many words you've got. Every time you type a word, it adds it up.
And I haven't looked lately, I was too busy going, but I know I've got at least 110 pages.
Yeah.
That I hope turns out. I just printed a few today, but.
I was just saying because I decided to download that template thing you were talking about.
Mhm.
So I'll just go with the 69.
Yeah, that would be a really smart place to start, you know.
And I have the one with the sample content, so it has all the chapters and stuff.
I
on
will
it.
warn you that the ones with the sample content are very useful guides for, like, especially for like the beginning parts of your book, like where a title page should be, where your chapter list should be, that kind of thing. But sometimes their template is a little hard to edit. So I downloaded both kinds. I downloaded the one that had the sample content, and then I downloaded the one that didn't. And I used the one with the sample content as a guide in the other one.
As you did the other.
Yeah, so just because editing the document, it's just kind of a pain. it had a little less flexibility than me creating the page myself.
If I already have it typed out on my computer and I have it in my document, I can cut and paste it that way back in, or should I start typing all over again?
You can cut and paste. I would probably cut and paste in sections because
Yeah.
clipboards can only hold so much, and sometimes it'll crash your computer if you're trying to, well, at least mine does if I try to copy too much over at one time. So maybe you do it like a chapter at a time, and that way you can format where you want your chapter pages to start and finish one at a time and break it down that way. Your like I said, your standard trim size, which is the next option they talk about, is 6x9, and that's what that book was. That's your most common and, well, just your most common version right now. So I mean, unless you have a specific reason to stray from that, I would just go with 6x9. And you can choose whether you want bleed or no bleed, which is how far your page can reach into the margins, that kind of thing. So they give you an option. They do let you do either matte covers or glossy covers. You have a choice. I like glossy because I feel like the way it catches light is eye-catching to somebody walking by. Matte stuff, I mean, is a little bit more traditional, but you really need to have a bolder cover. The reason I had a reason for doing a white cover with a flower and just leaving it at that, which is explained in the book, but the gloss is what made it look more professional. But if you have somebody who really did some like intricate artwork for you for your cover, you may want to go matte, just so that the artwork gets more of a chance to stand out than, you know, the shine losing your details. So
What about a hardcover? Because I did a cookbook, and I'd kind of like to maybe stay in that same.
I haven't messed with whether they do hardcovers or not. I feel like I saw somewhere that they offer the option, but I just don't know much about it. So that'd be one of those things you'd want to hop into their
Try to
forum and
maybe
ask some
keep-
questions.
Because I have a picture of the bed and breakfast on the cookbook.
Right.
But I
Do
still-
they have a question, like if you got a question that, you know, you didn't get answered there when you were answering all those questions, is there a place there where you can ask them a question?
Yep, and they're very quick on the draw.
Oh.
If you go into their contact section, they'll talk to you online. They'll let you
cool.
click a button and we'll call you as soon as we have an available operator. I mean, they have different options available
Really?
to connect with them.
Cool.
And they usually, I've never had a long wait trying to get somebody on the phone. I like talking to people on the phone when it comes to stuff like this, but not all of them are very good at speaking English, so you might prefer typing. Just kind of consider and contemplate. That gets you into the next sections of discussion, and these are two of your most important ones. This is where you upload your manuscript, and this is where it says manuscript is where you can click learn more about manuscripts or download a KDP template. So that's where you can go to click to find the templates. They will give you multiple options. Just make sure you're matching the same trim size that you chose. So if you're doing 6x9, then you need a 6x9 template. The templates are different based on how many pages you will have. So if I think the cutoff is at 150 pages before you have to do a different template. I think it's like 49 to 150 pages is one setup, and 150 to 300 pages is a different one. Most people aren't going to go beyond that. But that does change your trim size because of how thick your binding has to be. Think about the fact that when you open this book, shorter books can open further in the binding. So they need a larger margin in the center of the book to account for that if there's more pages. So that's why it matters. So you'll just want to make sure that you have a rough idea of how many pages you'll have. Given that you had 110 on your computer as it sits, I would probably go the 150 to 300 page route, because by the time you add in your title page, your contents, your copyright page, any dedications that you have, the extra couple of pages at the end where they have to do this blank page with your barcode, and you talk about formatting it down, you're probably going to go over 150. I wouldn't be surprised. Plus formatting the spacing of your chapter pages, if you add a blank page, that kind of thing, you're probably going to go over 150. And I would really hate to see you do it the one way and then have to go back and reformat it into another copy of a document, just because, yeah, that would be a pain. So
If you do that and you don't use all those pages, they take that all into consideration.
oh yeah, you don't have to use all the pages. That's just the range of pages that work with that margin setting. So, but they're gonna give you the opportunity. The other thing that really I still have issues fighting with it was page numbers. I mean, the program is Word, and they have a button that you can click to assign page numbers. But I wanted the first chapter to be like the little Roman numerals, and then start page 1. And I could not, for the life of me, figure out how to do that. If anybody figures it out,
Sounds
please
like
let me
me.
know. Yeah, give me a shout. I'd love to figure out how. I struggled with that on both books, never figured out how to fix it, and I just decided to give up on the fight. I set it so that page 1 is 0 and it doesn't show a number, and every page after that starts at 2, including my copyright page. It is what it is. I don't think anybody's really going to pay that close attention, but it does impact your table of contents page when you're setting up that structure. And that's something to remember too when you're going through your editing phase. If you get to, let's say, you add something that changes your page numbers, like you add an extra page to one of your chapters, you have to go back and modify all of your table of contents for every chapter. So wait until your book is the way you want it before you put your page numbers on your table of contents, or you're just going to go back and keep doing it again. And then you would upload your paperback manuscript. And then after that, they'll do a review process. And once it's available and they've finished what they need to review, they're going to have you go through this thing where you have to click through a digital visual of every single page. They're going to tell you any margin errors they have, any print errors they see, your picture is too far in the margin. They're going to make you go back and make all those corrections and continue to re-upload your manuscript until there are no issues. And then you can authorize that it's okay as it is. So
that comes in here in the, where are we at? In the manuscript part?
Yep, so you'll upload your manuscript, and then they'll give you a button to click to take you to launch this review program, basically. So you can go, you'll have to click through every page of your book, but it's a good opportunity to see what it's going to look like when somebody's legitimately flipping through the pages. So it's a really good resource to use, but you have to go through it at least once, and they have to identify on the side that there were no discrepancies whatsoever. They've called me out on having images that didn't have 300 dpi, even though I thought they did, which helped me because the print quality would have sucked if I hadn't had it. It is useful, but sometimes they're really nitpicky and there's just nothing you can do about it. Gotta work with them on it. But then you'll click that you approve the manuscript as it is once there are no more issues, and that will be what your interior is. So they're not going to let you just submit an interior manuscript and not have it be reviewed by multiple eyes, which is nice. And then your book cover. The book cover is probably the most fun that I have with doing books. What I will share with you is this. It is very flexible. For example, when Judy did her book, what she did was she went to somewhere like Fiverr, for example, and crowdsourced. So she said, I am going to, this is what I'm doing, this is my project, and multiple people submitted, oh, and this is how much I'm going to pay for whoever completes X number of things that I need. So I need a cover, I need one that I can use, an image that I can use for social media, I need it in this size and this size and this size. She specified everything that she needed, and the trim sizes and the resolution and all that kind of stuff, gave all the details. And then she crowdsourced. Multiple artists said, here's my take on what you said, here's my take on what you said. And she had like 10 or 20 different options available to her, and then she had some of her Facebook friends vote on it and what they liked best. And then she went with her gut on what she liked, paid that person, got everything she needed. And when you go into their cover creator program, it does offer you the ability to upload a completely personally created document. I'll launch the cover creator because why not? You'll see what I've finished here for my next book cover already. When it comes up on the screen, what I chose to do, I'll click choose design so you can see some of the options. There's different ways that you can play with it. That you can do the thing where you upload the whole thing already done, nothing else. But they also give you 2 or 3 pages of options if you would like to just insert an image, but have them help you structure the rest. So there's different formats that you can use for the back of the book, where pictures are in different places, text box are in different locations. You can play with how the back of the book will look. You can change the cover so that it's like, for example, they have it framed and only the image you upload will only go in the square.
Do they have an image archive, or do you have to supply all of your own images?
They do have some images, but honestly, everyone who uses KDP has access to them. So
You're
if you've
seeing it repeated.
right, you don't want to see your book cover be the same as somebody else's. Even if you use it in a different format or way, like this one is kind of cool. You can't see it very well, but it would put like portions of the image in the square and like a
Was
kind of
this,
an angled
if
one.
I had a photo of my place, then this is where it would somehow
Yep.
upload it in.
You would just click the button that allows you to upload your own image, and then you would go to Style and Edit, and it would allow you to rearrange, choose your fonts, that kind of thing. The only thing I will tell you is their fonts are very limited. So if you want a unique looking title on your cover page, you may want to do that in another program yourself before you upload the image, which is what I did here. I went into Ribbit.com, which even if you pay for a year of it, it's only like $30. It's pretty cheap.
It's Ribbit.
Yep, Ribbit. And they had a lot more text options. And I chose the font that I wanted to use. And then I went in and played with the transparency of the words, so it looked more like a movie cover. You know, I didn't want it to just be bold letters, and I couldn't because this image is dark in the center and white on the outside, and it wasn't working to use a solid color font, whether it was light or dark. So I had to do something creative to make it show up both ways. I ended up going to, I think it was iStock, and I purchased the ability to use this picture for like $10. And there are no royalties. $10 allows me to use it in my book for whatever I want. So there are several websites like that. I wrote a couple down that you can go to. There's iStock, Unsplash.com was where I got the flower for this. Unsplash is really good. It's all high resolution photos, and people are just professional photographers giving that away for free. Unsplash.com. They're all great images. You're allowed to use them, do what you want. They don't care. I still gave credit to the photographer in the cover, but I don't think I even was obligated to do that, to be honest. So that's free use, high quality, high resolution images. iStock had them, and there's a couple other sites out there that it's still really cheap to get a high quality image, and you can play around with that. So you don't necessarily have to go spend $200-300 to have somebody design a cover up for you. You can find an image, play with it yourself, plug it into the template, and still get something that looks really sharp. I mean, I don't know about you, but I like how that turned out. That says to me exactly what I wanted it to say. And I paid, I mean, if you count the total price of me using Ribbit as a pro 1 year, I paid $40 for that. So that's what I did for my cover, and I like it. Unsplash, this cover I paid $0 for that. I mean, if you can find somebody who has even Photoshop, they can help you put this font in here. And this one, I actually used their template where they had it set up so I used their font for these things, and then there was just an open square here for me to put my image, and I did that because it was white on white. It wasn't a border issue. You can play around with it, but it's kind of fun. Honestly, there's a lot of flexibility, and they give you the guidelines to make sure that nothing gets cut off in printing, so they'll be very specific with you about that. Get somebody who's really good at catchy, limericky things to help you come up with something for the back of your book, because 9 times out of 10, if somebody's picking your book up off a shelf to want to see what it is, they're going to read the back of the book and they're going to judge it on that. There are so many books that I have not picked up because the entire back of the book was people giving testimonials about how much they liked the book, and there was nothing about the book on it. So I guess if you want my 2 cents on it as somebody buying a book, say something about the book on the back. You know, I mean, it's nice to have accreditation. If you have people who are willing to say, in quotes, like, Professor so-and-so says this was a very accurate book and I enjoyed reading it, you know, that can be great, but just don't make it your whole back of your book. Like, actually say something about your book. A lot of people choose to put their face on the back of the book. I decided to take the humility route and put a picture of the Bible. There's a cute little story behind it for people who like the book, about where that Bible came from and how it was a gift to me, and that way I'm not the author, God is, and that was my cute little way of staying removed from it a little bit. But you don't have to put a photo on the back of the book either. You know, it's very flexible. You can have images that wrap around all the way around the book, and that's really neat visually to see too. So it's definitely pretty wide open, but if you want more creative flexibility for yourself, you're probably going to want to grab an image somewhere that you like and play with it in a program, or go somewhere like out crowdsourcing if you have the money to invest in it, because your cover is a lot of times what grabs somebody's eye in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And this is little stuff that, like, if you go with a mainstream publisher, they're gonna help you take care of. So in self-publishing, little details go a long way, and you know, don't be afraid to ask people for their feedback on stuff. I asked 10 different people what they thought about that before I committed to it, because I didn't want, you know, I knew what it meant to me, but I needed to know how they took it. There was 1 out of the 10 who said that that title doesn't match that image, but the rest of them totally understood exactly what I was trying to say, so I went with it. You know, if all of them had said it didn't make sense, well, I probably would have picked something else. So just kind of be flexible with it and have fun, but I enjoyed playing with that. So that's pretty much your paper book content page. And then once all of those first 2 pages is filled in, this will allow you, this book preview will allow you to click through and see the whole book cover to cover. So you can see exactly what that will look like. And then the last page, I can't click on it with this book. The last page is your paper book rights and pricing. That is mainly about picking what kind of distribution options you want and setting your pricing. That's where they're going to tell you this is your bare minimum cost for selling, how much it's going to cost to distribute it through who. So like I was saying earlier, bare minimum, I have to sell this book for $12.78, and then if they let me know there that if I sell it off of a bookshelf, because of the cost of distribution, you know, the transportation costs and stuff, it's actually like $14 for it to be on a bookshelf, because they ordered it, they pay for transportation, all that stuff.
Did they tell you how much you should charge for that book?
They tell you how much you will make for each book.
Oh.
So they give a little thing, like it's nice, they have a little calculator window where you can plug in, this is what the price will be, and then they'll show you all your distribution channels and tell you how much your profit's going to be off of each one.
Okay.
This is what you'll get paid by selling it through this medium. It gives you the ability to play around, but do know that things that go to a bookshelf are going to have an up mark on selling them through the website. So that's why I ended up having to go with 15, because sure, I could have set my price at like $13 and just sold it through Amazon and Barnes and Noble and been fine. But if I want it on a bookshelf, which I do, you know, that's kind of like the dream when you're an author, get it on a bookshelf. It would have to be a bare minimum of like $14.50. You know, I make $1 if somebody buys my book at Crossroads, but I want them to go support local business. I want them to keep Christian bookstores open, and I want it to be there, so I'll take it. You know, give me the $1. And that was my choice. I could have made the book $20, and I think with this amount of book, that still would have been cheap.
Yeah.
But, you know, I made a personal choice how much I was willing to take for it. Just enough to promote the book, you know.
Really?
And that's really all I was after.
I figure I won't get notoriety until I'm dead and gone.
That's how it typically works, right?
But you know, I did, speaking of Barnes and Noble, you know, I went in there to see that, Scott. And I said, because my first book, he wouldn't even look at me because it wasn't an actual ISBN number. And so I went in there the second time, you know, and I said, I got an ISBN number now. And he said, good, you know, but because Barnes and Noble is nationwide, he wouldn't take my book. And he gave me these 2 sheets of paper, and he said, call this number here. He said, because he said, Barnes and Noble and any other big book company like that, they want the control of your book.
They do.
They don't want you to have it, which is what I've got right now. I have control over it,
Right.
which is hard to sell.
I will tell you that if you want your book, if you go this route and you want your book like on the shelf at Barnes and Noble downtown, I had to go to them specifically. There are forms you can fill out to request to have your book on the shelf, but I had to go to them specifically, and he looked up my book. Crossroads didn't have this issue. They didn't really care either
No,
way.
they don't.
But Barnes and Noble, they will only put your book on the shelf if it's returnable, which means if they buy 5 copies of your book and put it on the shelf and none of them sell, eventually they can send it back and get their money back.
Oh.
My book was not set up that way. You can change it so that it is, but I didn't want to go through the hassle just to put it on their shelf. It's still on their website, and all of their coupons and things apply, which is kind of cool because sometimes I'll be like, hey, Barnes & Noble right now is running a 15% off discount plus free shipping. Go pick it up there. And I think that cuts into their cut of the profit, not mine. But you also have to consider that when I first published my book, I bought roughly, I think I bought 50 copies for myself. And I was going around and handing them out to people. I gave some away for publicity,
Right.
which is always a nice way to get the word out because people who like your book will tell your friends to read your book. I told people they could email me, and I would email free copies of the PDF. But a PDF doesn't cost me any money either. So
Oh.
I'm offering it out free to people who can't afford it, but I'm not offering to spend $5 on a hard copy and mail them a copy either.
Oh, yeah.
So, I'm okay with giving the content to people who need it and
Yeah.
who read it and take the time to do it,
Right.
but I also can't afford to hand out, ultimately between that and shipping, it's $8 per person, like I can do that.
I
So-
have taken a big loss on my first book. Real big loss.
Can I
Yeah.
ask how many copies you have sold?
Couple hundred. I really haven't pushed hard on the promotion of the book because of the fact that I knew there were still revisions I was processing to make. So I've given them out locally, family. I've been on some vacations where I sold some copies, put them in, like bookshops and,
Oh,
gas
really?
stations that have spindles with books. And I think I left a couple at the pick up a book, leave a book at the airport, So I've kind of tried to openly distribute them just to get the word of it out, but
Yeah.
I haven't focused hard on promoting it yet. Ultimately, what I decided my plan was going to be was I have a book available to offer people, and then I started a YouTube channel, and every YouTube channel in the description field has a link to my book. A lot of it's related concepts and content because I do a Bible study there. So I'm building up my SEO by sharing that link repeatedly over and over and over. It's found more places on the internet. And now that I have myself established in that way, I'm using that content created as a foundation for speaking gigs. And then once I get into doing the public speaking gigs, I will have a table where my book is available, and that's really how I'm going to market the majority of my books. I've kind of been building things up one step at a time, and that like I said, that gave me time to continue processing what I already wrote, have some space away from what I wrote, and then go back and read it again, because fresh eyes. I've had time away from it.
I think some of the professional speaking gigs, you have to have two written books before they will take a look at you.
Yeah, I'm about to wrap up my second one right now, and then I have 2 more that if I could just sit down for like a week, they'd be out of my head on paper, and I could probably finish them up in the next year. But the flexibility of self-publishing makes that possible. I don't have to wait for a line of
Is
people.
there a big long wait if you go to a major publisher?
There can be. Yeah, I mean, they're juggling more than just you, so that can be an issue too, having to wait on other people to edit and proof and do their roles. And it does give you the flexibility for your distribution channels too. So if you really do just want it to be an Amazon link and nothing else, you can do that. You can open it up to be books. I even have I opened it up to all of their distribution channels, and I had somebody who ordered a copy in France. So it is possible to do international selling online as well. And they'll do all the money conversion for you, so you don't have to worry about what a
Well,
pound is. And I had mentioned this earlier, when it comes to promoting your own book with the marketing, do you want to do things that will, for example, like I said, getting your link available more places so you rise up in the SEO on search engine optimization? I mean, there's people you can pay to do that, but really it's just about getting your name, your face, and the link to your book more places.
Well, the interesting thing is because I'm already out there with my business, that I can probably attach it some way into some of, it'll all.
Yeah, especially if
that
you're
good.
connecting the business into your story, you could probably double up on that and like maybe have it available through your business's website to be able to purchase it there, that kind of thing. Other things you can do, free events. People love free events. If you just show up and say, I'm going to talk for 15-20 minutes, you'll get people who will show up, and then have your book available on the table that they can buy. Speaking engagements, that's why a lot of authors get into speaking engagements. It helps promote your book. And usually if they like your book, they'll have you speak about what's in it. Social media is your friend, but paid ads are not always your friend. Paid ads can kind of be a waste of money if they're not very well done. I've had some paid ads that I did promoting my book that had lots of traffic. They got me tons of new people coming to my page that liked my business page, that interacted with the post, but not a single one of them actually buy the book. So that's more about building your audience than it is about book sales if you go the advertising route, paid advertising. Your grassroots marketing of getting in with people in places. Like, for example, this book, now that I've got a couple videos of me doing public speaking so I can provide a demo to people, I'm going to go to different churches and be like, hey, this would make a great workbook. I'll come talk to people so they recognize the face and they can ask their questions. And then here's a copy of my book. You can know a little bit about me. And, a whole group of people using it as a workbook is going to buy the book at the same time. 20, 30 people potentially doing a study out of it. Ways to get in with your target markets can be helpful too. But I feel like out of the whole self-publishing process, the hardest part is marketing your book. You really have to give it focus. You really have to do your networking. You really have to put it out there and make sure you've put together a professional product so that, they shouldn't be able to look at your book and know that you self-published it. Ultimately, it needs to look just like a publisher did it. And if you feel like it's not meeting that expectation, it doesn't look like a publisher did your book, then revise it. Because it's got to have that clean feel.
See, my first book, it has its own page on Facebook, but that's all I get is people making comments and stuff. I thought, come on, ask me where you can get the book.
They don't ask.
No,
you really have
they
to
don't.
put things out
I
there.
do, and then of course Facebook. I suppose the suckers behind that. They always want to. They say, "Oh well, for $10, we can expand your this page, to more readers,
Yeah.
And I tried it once. Well, that's all it did was cost me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a well-composed ad on Facebook, especially if you target it to your audience, because they'll allow you to do that. They'll allow you to say, I want it to be people in Sioux Falls. I want it to be people in this age group. I want it to be only women. Or, you can target the audience you want it to hit so that you maximize your spending. But ultimately, that's going to get you visual publicity, because every person, like if you have a business page and you run a Facebook ad and no matter what you're promoting in it, every person that likes or interacts with your post can be invited to like your page.
Yeah.
As like extra bonus. You click a button and it gives you an invite button.
I
You can
have
get a
been-
lot more
yeah.
interaction and build an audience.
I
but
have been
they're not
leery
just
about
gonna
putting my
buy
second book,
random books.
on its own page. I might still do it, but
The big thing going around right now is building up email lists. Personally, I'm not a fan, but there are a lot of people who find success with building up an email list related to your business and then emailing them about pre-release, marketing your book that way. And then by the time that the book actually becomes available, it's already on your bestseller list because 50,000 people on your email list bought it right away.
Yeah.
You know, so there's people who, if you're really looking to make it big with it, that they can help you do that. Personally, I'm just not a fan of the email list because I don't check junk email. You know,
I don't either, not a lot.
I mean, I sign up, like they'll bait you in with something free.
Oh, yeah.
Like, here's my 3-day workshop, or here's the free copy of this short manuscript. You know, they'll bait you in with something free, and you have to provide your email to get the link to access
Oh,
it.
yeah.
And then they'll just email you, and I never ever read those emails. And I don't know many people who do, but apparently they make money with it, so something's working for somebody. But I don't like it. So now that we've kind of been through all of the process, and there will be a button that you click that says, are you sure you're ready to publish this now? And then it'll tell you it's available, and then you're live. It's available everywhere. That's really all there is to it. You know, there's more work behind getting the stuff ready than there is actually doing it on the website, but those few little bits that you can grab in the beginning of the process can save you a lot of work down the road. That's really what it comes down to. But it's very user friendly, very easy to follow, and they pay out monthly. Anything ordered or books sold, that kind of thing, they pay out once a month.
And when do you pay the bill? When do you pay for?
I don't have a bill. It's free.
This is all free.
All free.
But, I mean, when you initially started, there was something that you had to pay, right?
Nope.
So,
So,
I
want, that's what I want to know, how that works.
Published it completely free. They are taking their cut out of each individual book sale.
Okay.
They're not pre-printing any certain amount, so they've not sunk anything in it, just like you haven't sunk anything in it. They're just letting you take the chance of publishing your book and letting you run with it. But that minimum sale price, that minimum $12, they're taking a cut out of that. So that's why anything beyond that minimum sale price is what you get. That's where your income comes from.
you could push it up a little if you thought you needed $2 or $3 more.
Yep. I can change the price whenever I want. I can update my manuscript anytime I want. I can start and stop production anytime I want. There's no contract. There is no restriction. It is very, very open to just do what you want to do.
But if you ordered books, then you pay for books.
Yes, but don't order more than you think you can immediately sell. If you're going to start going to events and having a table out, make sure you have enough copies. So I want to open it up. Did anybody else have questions?
I do. You talked about the monthly royalty payments that you get. When I first started looking into it, they originally said that they don't pay royalties out until you hit a certain mark. And I think it was like $100 or some dollars that you had to hit a certain amount of royalty back to you before they would actually pay out anything.
They say that, but they didn't follow through on that with me. Like, even when I had just like $20, they still paid it out.
And it's
In
every
fact, there was
month,
one
or
time
is
where they
it-
paid me $3. So, because I had one book sold.
Yeah.
So, it was monthly, and you can set up direct deposit. They don't have to mail you a check. So, it just showed up in my account, and I was trying to figure out why my account was off balance. I didn't even know that book had been sold, and
Yeah.
so, like, what happened?
And where is your, how many, you have 2 books written or more?
I'm working on finishing up my second one. right
And
now.
where are they? Are they, they're, other than Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where are they?
It's so scattered.
They are, and how did you
I-
get them scattered?
I went there.
Oh.
I
Oh, that
I
was when you were selling them on your own.
well, I was invited to a conference in West Palm Beach,
Oh,
and so I took some copies with me.
sure.
I drove from here to North Carolina for my niece's wedding, and so I made stops along the way and offered to put them in, like, you know, some of these gas stations have like spindles with books. So
But
I
did they
gave
buy
them
them from you then?
some. Yeah.
Oh,
You know, not everyone does it that way. You know, some people will like
yeah.
have to go through X, Y, and Z channels to
Yeah,
get a book
right.
put somewhere, but some of them did. You
So
know,
you should have like an order form if you do that. If you have
Yeah.
your book
Oh,
and you
sure.
stop
Keep
someplace
track.
and they say you can't, we can't do it here. We have to go to a corporate office or whatever.
Well,
Just
yeah.
say here's the order form. Just have
Right.
something that they can
Right.
can have and don't take no.
also very important, sales tax. You have to file for a sales tax permit
Oh,
when you're
sure.
selling out of your hand.
Yeah, see, Jason tried to tell me that, and I said, "Do you know how old I am?" I said, I was always told that once you went past 65, you could make as much money as you wanted, and you didn't have to do that anymore."
Well, it's not about income, it's about what you're selling.
Yeah.
So here's what you'll need to know. You need to apply for the sales tax permit. It is free to apply for it. You don't have to pay for that. But you can either have it billed monthly or quarterly. I do quarterly, just because I'm not really I might shift to monthly once I start engaging more public speaking. Your online stuff, like Amazon all that stuff, they will take care of sales tax for you on anything sold online. But I buy 50 copies, I sell them out of my hand, I have to charge sales tax and I have to report it.
Oh, sure.
So
Well,
be very
believe
good
me,
at your
my
bookkeeping.
first book, I am in the hole. Let me tell you, I don't expect to ever get out of that one.
Also know that if you decide to do tables at events, especially downtown, you have an increase in premium on your sales tax for tourism rates. So, like where it's normally 7%, I think it's 8% when you do events downtown, or 8.5%. Something
Yeah,
like
I
that.
think when my son and I, quite a few years ago, we used to get a table at the flea market when they were out to, I forget where they were, down to the Coliseum, I believe. Now we had to pay a certain amount there too, and leave it there for the main guy that had the flea market. I forget how to word that.
Benson,
So
please.
if I'm out of state, I deal with the sales tax in my state, or when I come down
No,
here,
it's point of sale. Wherever you're
Yeah,
at,
yeah.
it's the point of
It's
so
sale.
I
their
would
sales
have
tax.
to, if I went from state to state and sold them out of my purse,
So you have to know every single state that
I
you're
would
selling
have to
in.
know.
Yeah.
And you have to have a sales tax license in every state that you're
Yeah.
selling in.
I mean, technically, if you're in South Dakota, or let's say you lived in South Dakota, and you get your sales tax permit here and you mail it to somebody, I think it's still, because they bought it out of here, they have to follow South Dakota sales tax. But if you're like physically in Georgia, for example, you have to follow their sales tax and pay the sales tax to Georgia.